Hello, I'm Maria Titizian.
And I'm Rubina Margosian, and this is the Week in Review.
Every week, we bring you the stories shaping Armenia and the region.
From politics and policy to social issues and conflict, we break down the news and what it means for you.
This week in the news, U.S. approves Nvidia chip exports to Armenia for the country's first major AI data center. Pashinyan urges U.S. action on Armenian detainees held in Baku. And Armenia and Kazakhstan to deepen ties, planning a strategic partnership. These stories and more in our weekly roundup of the news.
The U.S. government has approved the export of Nvidia chips to Armenia for the region's first large-scale AI data center, a project led by the startup Firebird and backed by an initial $500 million investment. The 100-megawatt facility, first announced by Nvidia in June, will use Dell AI servers and Nvidia Blackwell processors. The first phase is scheduled to be operational in the second quarter of next year, according to Firebird CEO Nikol Pashinyan. 80% of the facility's capacity will be sold to American firms doing business in the region, while the remaining 20% will be allocated to Armenian companies. Firebird, one of Nvidia's partners building high-power data centers in remote locations, received an export license as the U.S. eased restrictions on exporting advanced AI chips under the Trump administration. This first phase of the project will be funded by debt and equity raised by Firebird, which is backed by Moderna co-founder Noubar Afeyan. Prime Minister Pashinyan and President Trump had signed a memorandum of understanding regarding the AI and semiconductor innovation partnership on August 8. In a statement, the U.S. Embassy called it an important development that marks a powerful step forward in U.S.-Armenia trade and investment relations. Mikhitar Hayrabedian, Minister of High-Tech Industry of Armenia, told the New York Times that the cooperation on technology started years ago, but Trump and Pashinyan had brought the partnership to a new level of development. He added, "This is an important part of our long-term modernization efforts alongside the U.S.-Armenia partnership framework." In a press briefing, Pashinyan said he recently spoke with Trump on the topic and noted that investors had certain concerns regarding the procedures. Pashinyan thanked the White House for very quickly addressing the issue. The investment project will surely be implemented, he told reporters.
U.S. Undersecretary of State Allison Hooker visited Yerevan and Baku this week to advance the U.S.-backed TRIP initiative, meeting with senior officials in both capitals. In Yerevan, Hooker told Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan that Washington is launching bilateral working groups led by Deputy Assistant Secretary Sonata Coulter to implement agreements and move TRIP forward. Coulter oversees U.S. policy toward Russia and Central Europe. Hooker also met with Foreign Minister Arat Mirzoyan to review progress in the Armenia-U.S. strategic partnership, including cooperation on energy infrastructure, artificial intelligence, and investment. In Baku, Hooker held talks with Azerbaijani Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov. Azerbaijan, according to officials, expressed interest in accelerating work on TRIP.
And Turkey will open its border with Armenia only after Yerevan and Baku finalize a peace treaty, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said this week, tying normalization directly to progress in Armenia-Azerbaijan negotiations. Fidan added that two issues must be resolved before Ankara moves forward: amendments to Armenia's constitution and the establishment of a transport corridor through Armenia's south. Points, he noted, were not included in the pre-initial August 8 agreement reached in Washington. He warned that opening the border prematurely would remove what he called Armenia's biggest incentive to conclude a deal with Azerbaijan, and said Turkey wants to avoid creating a new frozen conflict in the region. Yerevan, however, maintains that normalization with Turkey and peace talks with Azerbaijan are separate tracks. Responding to Fidan's comments, Armenian Foreign Minister Arat Mirzoyan said Armenia is ready to establish diplomatic relations and open the border as soon as possible. He added that full normalization with Turkey could actually support rather than hinder the peace process with Azerbaijan. These are two separate tracks, and Armenia is making sincere efforts in both directions, Mirzoyan said. He added that contrary to Fidan's claim, full normalization with Turkey could actually have a positive impact on Armenia-Azerbaijan settlement processes. Fidan, who used the term Zangezur Corridor, got a swift response from Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. Speaking to reporters, Pashinyan rejected any unilateral naming of infrastructure on Armenian soil. In Armenia, there is the Crossroads of Peace project and there is the TRIP project, he said. Any other terminology does not apply to the Republic of Armenia.
At a regional summit in Tashkent, this is the capital of Uzbekistan, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev announced that construction of Azerbaijan's segment of the so-called Zangezur corridor is nearing completion, calling it a key piece of the Middle Corridor trade route. Aliyev said the railway, expected to handle 15 million tons of cargo annually, along with its parallel highway, is close to being finished and will strengthen Azerbaijan's transit role once operational. He also expressed confidence that agreements recently reached in Washington on connecting mainland Azerbaijan to its Nakhichevan exclave would further expand regional transport capacity. Separately, Aliyev's foreign policy advisor, Hikmet Hajiev, said the corridor would give Azerbaijan new opportunities to reach Turkey directly and access global markets through Turkish ports. They're very motivated, as we can see, Rubina, but they are insisting on calling it the Zangezur corridor.
And Lebanese Armenian detainee Viken Ülcekcan is reportedly in rapidly declining health inside a Baku prison, according to his wife, Linda Ülcekcan, who says he can no longer walk and is being denied essential medical care. Ülcekcan is serving a 20-year sentence handed down by a Baku kangaroo court, basically, on charges of terrorism, mercenarism, and illegal border crossing. Linda says she heard from her husband this week for the first time in 45 days. During the call, he said he suffered severe leg pain, requires a wheelchair, and is not receiving medication for heart-related conditions despite doctors' prescriptions. She says prison guards have blocked access to all medication even after he was taken to a medical facility. Ülcekcan also reported receiving only bread and tea with no proper meals or nutrition and said he's being held in near total isolation, unable to speak to anyone or ask for help. Ülcekcan and Lebanese Armenian Maral Najarian were captured on November 10 in 2020, one day after the end of the 44-day war, while driving towards Shushi to pack up their belongings. Najarian was later released. Viken's wife believes his current condition is the result of severe beatings during his capture.
Well, meanwhile, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan said during a press briefing that he raised the issue of the Armenian detainees held in Baku with U.S. Deputy Secretary or Undersecretary of State Alison Hooker, asking that it remain a priority for Washington. He recalled that during their meeting in August in the White House, U.S. President Donald Trump stated that he would support efforts to secure the release of the 23 Armenian captives, while the former leaders of Artsakh were handed prison sentences ranging from 16 years to life last week in Baku. The trial of Rupen Vartanyan is still ongoing.
The leaders of Armenia and Kazakhstan announced their intention to elevate their relationship to the level of strategic partnership. Pashinyan is in Astana for his first official visit. Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev called Pashinyan's visit very important, adding that a series of historic agreements would be signed during the visit. He described Armenia as a key partner in trade and economic relations. The leaders discussed a wide range of cooperation areas, including trade, infrastructure, transport, agriculture, aviation, education, and culture. Particular attention was paid to the unblocking of regional communication routes, which both sides said would give new momentum to regional economic development. A notable practical outcome already in place is the shipment of Kazakh wheat to Armenia. The two leaders expressed hope that such deliveries would continue on regular basis. Both leaders stressed the importance of implementing the Crossroads of Peace project proposed by Armenia and the Transport Corridor Europe-Caucasus-Asia initiative, as well as launching direct flights between Yerevan and Astana. Pashinyan welcomed the decision to name a street in Astana after Mesrop Mashtots, the creator of the Armenian alphabet.
This week, EU Special Representative for the South Caucasus, Magdalena Grono, was in Yerevan, where she met with Foreign Minister Arat Mirzoyan and other officials. The discussions focused on the Armenia-EU partnership, with both sides noting progress, reflecting the depth and momentum of their cooperation. They reviewed upcoming programs and potential new initiatives, including efforts to further strengthen Armenia's resilience. Mirzoyan and Grono exchanged views on regional developments as well. They highlighted the compatibility between the EU's Global Gateway Initiative — this is a strategy by the European Union to invest in infrastructure projects globally — and Armenia's Crossroads of Peace project, and discussed ongoing steps to advance both. Grono also met with Marcus Ritter, the head of the EU mission in Armenia, the EUMA, to review recent developments developments on the ground, the mission's activities and priorities moving forward.
And Armenia's Public Service Regulatory Commission has revoked the operating license of Electric Networks of Armenia, the country's sole electricity distributor, owned by the Tashir Group of jailed Russian Armenian billionaire Samvel Karapetyan. The decision came after 3 days of hearings, with regulators accusing the company of systemic violations, claims ENA rejects as politically driven and legally baseless. Commission Chair Mesrop Mesropian acknowledged the move could expose the state to hundreds of millions of dollars in compensation, but called the risk manageable. Despite the license being stripped, electricity supply will continue uninterrupted. Interim manager Romanos Petrosyan will run the company for the next 3 months while the government negotiates a purchase from the Karapetyan family. A third party could also step in. If no deal is reached by mid-February of 2026, the state says it will seize 100% of ENA's shares through a designation of eminent domain and will offer compensation, although a final amount has not been calculated yet. The Karapetyans are currently seeking roughly $500 million in an ongoing international arbitration case. Independent audits put ENA's equity closer to $360 million, alongside significant debt. Economists warn that however the standoff ends, Armenian taxpayers may ultimately bear the financial cost. Meanwhile, Samvel Karapetyan's pretrial detention was extended by 2 months this week. He has spent 5 months in custody on charges of public calls to seize power, tax evasion, and money laundering, all of which he denies.
Armenia's Defense Minister Suren Babikyan held high-level talks with his Emirati counterpart during an official working visit to the UAE this week. The meeting focused on prospects for bilateral defense cooperation. Both sides expressed readiness to expand collaboration in the defense sector and intend to sign a formal agreement that will outline key areas of joint work. Babikyan also attended the official opening ceremony of the Dubai Air Show 2025, one of the world's largest aerospace exhibitions. He observed aerial demonstrations and toured exhibition pavilions to review the latest defense and aviation technology on display.
And in other news, the ruling Civil Contract Party won municipal elections in Bagharshabat. This is Echmiadzin. The party, led by Argishti Mekhakian, secured 48.8% of the vote and will have enough seats to elect the mayor. Civil Contract was followed by the Hakhtanak Alliance with 32% and Mother Armenia with just over 5%. The Hakhtanak Alliance brings together the ARF and Araj parties, while Mother Armenia is affiliated with the parliamentary opposition Armenia Alliance. Aram Sargsyan's Hanrapetitun came close to the threshold with 3.95%, and Vanetsyan's Hayrenik received 3.8%. All other parties received less than 2%. In municipal elections, the threshold is 4% for parties and 6% for alliances. The Central Electoral Commission has not yet announced the final distribution of mandates.
And the Masi City Council elected a new mayor this week following last month's arrest of David Hampartsumyan. And I have to apologize for the noise. Yerevan, as we know, has become a huge construction lot and there's construction everywhere. Anyway, during an extraordinary session, council members chose First Deputy Mayor Noray Hagopian, a member of the David Hampartsumyan Alliance faction. It's interesting, right? We should name an alliance after ourselves and...
I've been telling you
You've been telling
we should start a political party.
Well, the Civil Contract Party did not nominate a candidate. Hampartsumyan was found guilty after a 6-year trial and sentenced to 6 years and 3 months in prison. He had previously been released on bail, but the court revoked it and ordered his detention.
And our internal joke about starting a political party, but what's happening now is that there's so many alliances, and all these alliances are so many new names that it's very difficult to follow which party is under the new alliance. It's almost like they're repackaging themselves under new names, totally. And you eventually find out it's basically the
Mother Armenia or ARF,
just like new alliance names across the board.
Right.
And the Gyumri, back to Gyumri, and we'll be talking about Gyumri a lot, I'm assuming.
I suspect we will be, yes.
In Gyumri, Mayor Vartan Ghukasyan, who is already in pre-trial detention on corruption charges, is now under investigation for hooliganism. After a court hearing this week, Ghukasyan used vulgar and degrading language implying sexual violence towards the wives and daughters of those accusing him. He insisted that he has nothing to do with corruption. I mean, he's known for this kind of language, and
it's really disgusting. I have no other words.
But threatening with rape is kind of its. Well, his son Spartak Ghukasyan, who has been under house arrest for coercive extortion, he has now been placed in 2 months detention on similar charges.
Yeah. And finally, a lien has been placed on the property and financial assets of former Yerevan Mayor Daron Markaryan. The prosecutor's office is seeking to confiscate more than 2 billion Armenian dirhams. This is about 5.2 million US dollars in a case involving illegal acquisition of property. The claim targets Markaryan and individuals linked to him. The case has been in court since September. Prosecutors allege that during his tenure as first deputy mayor and then later as mayor of Yerevan, and this stretches from 2009 all the way to 2018, Markaryan abused his official powers for personal gain, laundered large-scale assets obtained through criminal means, and failed to impose administrative penalties on those who had illegally seized state-owned property. You know, it was an open secret with the mayors and city council in Yerevan.
Yeah,
I mean, we can name all of them. And anyway, so let's see where that goes. And as always, we go through the articles that we published this week. And first-time writer, I'm very, very pleased that she has joined us, Anush Begoyan. She wrote a piece called A Viral Scandal and the Line Between Privacy and Public Interest. So she asks, you know, what are the legal and ethical boundaries between privacy and public interest in a democratic society? And she uses the recent leaked video of Archbishop Khachaturian. She outlines established principles that distinguish legitimate scrutiny from voyeurism and scandal. She had a subhead that I really like, that the public interest is not what the public is interested in. I mean,
yes. Well, maybe there are cases that the two coincide. Mm-hmm. And speaking of which, we have another piece this week by Hranush Dermoyan. It's titled Armenia's Murky Surveillance Landscape When Privacy Becomes Politics. And what Hranush, staff writer here at EVN, has done is basically she's looked at all the major leaked videos and audio recordings that have been politicized, that have been the basis for a lot of arrests and charges, categorized them, mm-hmm. and looks at them through the lens of in which case we know who did the recording, who leaked it, in which case it resulted in charges, in which cases it was, dropped the mm-hmm. charges. So it's just an overview of our recent history of surveillance.
Since 2018, and it's somehow become part of the landscape now. Every couple of months or whatever, we hear about a new leak. Anyway, Ani Toroyan, our creative tech section editor, has written The Quiet Strategy, Driving Global Wins for Armenian Startups. And she's very rational, and she looks at things through, not through rose-colored glasses, but also not cynically, obviously. But she says that Armenian startups rarely win abroad through formal global expansion plans. Instead, some founders have found that what really opens doors is the informal sort of trust-based networks of the Armenian diaspora. And she says, like, for example, if you know somebody at Netflix or Audi or P&G or whatever, more than likely that Armenian is the one who will open doors for you. And it's a really beautiful thing, and I wish we understood this more and took advantage of it more.
And not so much about tech, but kind of not unrelated, Building the Architecture of Cybersecurity, Armenia's Institutional Turn. It's a piece by Albert Merzetian. He says Armenia has lagged in global cybersecurity rankings. It's not just him saying it, it's just rankings are out there. But new institutions and comprehensive cybersecurity law and alignment with EU standards signal a turning point. The author examines the country's emerging governance frameworks, its structural advantages, and the challenges ahead in implementation.
And our intern, who was with us for several weeks, Catherine Odom, was in Shirak region, and she filed a report called Mixed Feelings in Shirak about reopening Armenia-Turkey border. And she spoke to residents in the border villages about the possible reopening of the Armenia-Turkey border and the Kars-Gyumri railway. And she found a mix of hope, skepticism and deep historical unease. It was an interesting story for sure.
And a couple of our podcasts that we published this week, I talked with photographer Winslow Martin, who's been working in Armenia since 1999 and coming and going and has a deep relationship with Armenia. And recently he took his photographs and his experiences and turned it into a performance.
Yeah, you went to that.
In
How
the
was
theater.
it?
It was very interesting. It's called A Love Letter to Armenia, and his experience into how he came to know of Armenians, or his first encounter with Armenia coming. And every time it just happens that whenever he's here, which is, he shouldn't take credit for it, that historical moments are happening too often in Armenia. So he's also captured a lot of our recent history and from a very interesting perspective. And I was telling him during the podcast that when I view his photos, I don't feel the outsider. They look very much like intimate and very much like from a point of view of someone who deeply understands and cares. So it was interesting to see all this multimedia performance come together, but also to talk to him because he's also a very interesting person to talk to. And we usually don't mention our Armenian podcast during the week in review, but
Why
not? We should. We do have a podcast in Armenian. It's done by EVN Report. EVN usually in his podcast series but and yet still. It's kind of a fun name, I think, but it's definitely a tongue twister.
Yeah, I don't even bother trying.
He speaks to a lot of artists, and this time he's spoken with Solak Topcan, who's an artist from Gyumri who lives in Germany currently, but has returned to Armenia for his first solo exhibition ever here. And so Solak is talking about his need, and I think a lot of us might really associate with this, to extend time, to make time. So instead of making this one line that would take a second to draw, he tried to make it as long as possible, extract the time in a way. So he's working with embroidery. And he's working with fabrics because he says he finds it very interesting for his line to be immersed in the fabric that he's working with. So it's very interesting. His exhibition is still ongoing in Yerevan. You can find out more if you listen to the podcast.
Okay.
Because I don't remember the dates, or else I would have mentioned it.
Well, that's the kind of week we've had here in Armenia. Thank you for listening. Have a safe and peaceful weekend, and we'll be back again next week.